then we're going to take and we're going to do our tines. Now we've only got 5 tines. And if you look, this one's rather small, this one's a little bigger, this one's small, this one's bigger, and this one's small. So what we're going to do, relatively small I should say. So what we're going to do is we're going to take and we're going to forge our tines from 1.5 inches hot rolled, and we're going to forge four of them, or 3 of them from 1.5 inches hot rolled, and we're going to forge 4 of them from 1.25 inches hot rolled. Okay, that gives us 2 to choose from as we pick and choose which ones match better. If you just forge 5 of them, then you're stuck with what you got. If you forge 7, it doesn't take that much longer to forge 7, and it gives you a little bit of a choice. I like having a choice. So that's what we're going to do next. So what we're going to do now is we're going to take our measurements and we're going to plot out the lengths for our tines. Now I normally start out with a set length and cut them with the portaband, and then we cut them to the actual needed length once we've tapered them and we have them textured. Then we cut them to length one by one as we go. So once we get them cut, then we take and we weld handles on them, and with the handles welded on them, then we take and we put them in the power hammer and we taper them down to length to a nice smooth taper. Not really smooth, I don't guess. We don't care if it's smooth or not. We just want a nice even taper. Now as we taper that, we go round and around and around and around just to make sure that we get a nice smooth taper and an even taper. And of course this is a time-lapse shot. So at this point we have our main beam tapered and textured. We have our tines tapered and textured, and we're going to start the process of building it. The first thing we do is we take the main beam and we rough bend it. Okay, as you'll see in the video, I set this in a pipe vise, and I put it in a pipe vise, and I heat it up with a rosebud, and I bend this and this. Now when it comes to this bend here, I find it's easier once I establish where it needs to be to heat it up in the forge and just use the weight from here down to bend that. I just face it the way it needs to go and I bring it down on the anvil and I bend it. Okay? So I do it both on the bench with the rosebud, and I do it in the forge using the weight of the antler. Now, as I bend, this is why we use the soldering wire. Okay? As I bend, I measure. And I get my bends where I want them to be. And I use my soldering wire to measure. Most of the time I don't even get a tape measure out from this point on. I just come up and I see where that needs to be on the actual antler, and then I bring it over and I put it on there and I put me a mark where I need to make the bend. Okay, I don't even use a tape measure. Okay? So I get the whole thing bent. So now we're going to take our solder and we're going to measure from the end of the shed to the first tine, or to the first bend, I should say, and we're going to start making the first bend, eating and getting ready for the bend. So we mark our solder, then we bring it over, and we transfer that mark over to our tine. Now, we're just going to double check our finished length, make sure where we want to be, and we are. So we're going to take our piece of pipe. What we use is a piece of 1.25" pipe. Oh, I don't know, it's about 4 feet long, and that's what we use for bending. Going to fire up our rosebud on our torch. Get it adjusted. And we'll start heating where our mark's at. Now this is going to be a time lapse because it takes a lot longer than what we're going to show. So this is a time lapse recording. Once we get it to the heat, we're going to slip the bar on the end, and we're going to start bending. As we bend, we look at our original sitting to our right, and we compare the two as we go. Now we take a good look at the original again. As I said, your eyes are going to work harder than anything else in doing this. You have to have an eye for this. Heat it up some more, bend it some more. Just keep bending it. Now one thing you need to remember as you do this is you need to remember what you got hot. Because the last thing you want to do is lay your arm up against that tine or against that main beam. That main beam is going to be hot. Now we're picking up on it, bending it upward now. Now if you notice, if you look over there at the vise is kind of wobbly and it picks up. We eventually end up welding a piece of pipe to it and then adding C-clamps to hold it in place. And it'll become more apparent in a little bit that we're fighting it. So we keep comparing it to the original. Just keep heating and bending and heating and bending. Keep comparing. Back and forth, back and forth. Now we're going to get another measurement where we're at on our bend and where we're going to start our next bend. Like I said, this is why we use the solder, because if we use a cloth tape, the cloth tape will get burnt. Some kind of wire, whether it be copper or solder or even baling wire. You need some kind of wire to do this. The cloth tape will just burn. Go over and mark that. And we start again. Kind of redundant, isn't it? And we just keep heating and bending and heating and bending. Now you'll watch, you'll see the whole table move. Be real handy if that table was tied down, but it's not. It's on wheels, and I couldn't hardly, I shocked the wheels, but it still wanted to move. Gets a little frustrating after a while. Keep heating and we keep bending. Now we'll pull some more, move the table some more. I think he even thought about changing the table to the other table. But we're getting it bent. Compare it to the other one. I think at this point we're starting to run out of oxygen. Spin it around a little bit, get it up a little closer. Try to eliminate some of that bend in that vise, some of the leverage. Tighten it down real good. Fiddle with the torch, adjust it. Like I said, I think we're about out of oxygen, I think. Once I get it bent, then I take the tines and I take my measurements, and I don't even look at that, okay? I just come up here and I pull me a measurement here where I want it to be, and I got a pile of tines. Like I said, I've got a pile of these tines. This is 1.25 inches, this is 1.5 inches. I take my, it's going to be kind of awkward, because I'm trying to show you, but I come up here and I just lay that on there, on the original. Figure out where I remember, I got to keep in line with where my main beam's at, not up here, back here where my main beam's actually running. And I come up here, and I just come down here, and I make a mark with my Sharpie, right there. Now once I do that, now, like I said, we're going to pretend this is the original. Once I do that, I come up here, whichever size tine I'm going to use, and I figure out exactly, relatively, what angle I need that. And then I come up here and I do that angle, save myself some welding if you see that. And then I cut that on a bandsaw. And that gives me my tines. Now, like I said, I come up here, I get my first one, and I start from this end. I rough shape the tine in the forge, get a rough bend on it where I think it needs to be, and then I come up and I tack it. So, we've got our main beam bent, and we're going to start with the first tine We've got it tacked on there and we're going to start welding it up. Now this is what we call the first pass, and it's not really, we're just trying to get it in place and make sure it's where we want. We're not really filling in anything yet. We're just, like I said, we're trying to get it in place, and we're not building up any yet to make it match anything. But that gives us our first tine. Now this is why I don't use cloth tape. When I get ready to do the second one, I come up here and I always measure from the end. I don't measure from the last one I did. I measure from the end. So I come up here on the real antler. I come up here on the real shed. I go where I think the middle's going to be, about right there. Then I just come over to the steel one that's in the jig, and I lay that back down. And I tack the second one on. Now we've already measured our second one. We've already bent our second one in the forge. We've cut it to length. We've cut the angle. Now we mark our steel. We bring this over. We look at where it's positioned on the rack. They're not all in line. This one's down here at about, we'll call that 9. This one's at 10. This one comes up, it's still probably about 10. This is back to 9. This is about 8:30. And then this is the original main beam. So you got to watch where they're positioned along there. Okay? And you do that on down here and you weld them on. So now we have the second tine. We've pre-shaped it in the forge. We've pre-textured it. We're ready to put it on. We've got it measured. We know where we want it. So we're going to tack it in place. Take a second look at our antler. Here we go. So like I said before, this is kind of a time lapse of how we're doing this. Now we're going to check, now that we've got it tacked, we're going to compare it, make sure it's where we want it. Look at the original, check back and forth. Like I said, your eye's going to work harder than anything else. That's just how it is. Now we're going to rotate it in a vise. Now if you notice at this point, I've got a piece of pipe welded on to the end of that to give us a little more stability. And then you can't see them, but off to the left there's some C-clamps keeping that from going down. So we've got it repositioned, and now we're going to continue to weld on it. We're going to get really carried away with the welding shots because you've seen plenty of footage of me welding. You don't need to see any more of it. We just keep working our way around it. Rotate it again. Now if you notice, I started kind of down in that dip, and I came up starting that, there's a taper there, and we're just starting that taper a little bit is what we were doing there. Now we're just going to look at it and see what we think. Now we're going to go over and we're going to get our third tine, picking out which one we want. Cut it with the bandsaw. Forge it. Get it the taper we want, or get the rough shape we want. Get it in place. Now if you'll notice, I've got a bevel guide just to help me get that angle right in my mind. Now we're going to bring it over, we're going to set in place. We're going to check our original. And now we're going to tack it. Once again, we get it tacked. We're going to check, see how it looks against the original. Stand back, look at it real good. Using our eyeballs. We're happy with it. So we're going to continue welding it. But this is all time lapse. We just keep going from one side to the other. Rotate it again. I'm a little lazy on the lazy side. If I don't have to weld out of position, I'm not going to. I can, but if I can weld easy, I take the easy route. And there it is. There's all of our tines welded on. Once you weld them on, you get your basic welding done. Then you have to build up in here and in here and in here and in here, and you have to make it flow. The neater a job you can do on that, the more time you're going to save yourself with grinding and blending that in. If you just gob that on there, you're going to fight it and fight it. You need to put nice welds in there. Okay? So once you get that welded up what I call the first pass, and you get your webs and everything in there, then you take a grinder, a 4.5-inch grinder, and you grind that down and you blend it. Okay, you take some time and you blend it on all sides. Okay, once you get that blended the first time, you're going to have craters, you're going to have places you're not happy with. So what you want to do after that is you want to take and you want to fill those in and build it up. Now, on the second pass of welding, I took, like I said, this gets bigger in here. So I took this and I built this up with weld, and it tapers. Okay, I made that smooth. Okay, I made that transition easy. Okay, it flows. The transition flows. Now up here where this is thicker, I ended up taking a piece of a 5/16 rod and laying it along the inside here and welding that up in there to build that up wider here or here. Okay, so this is thicker, and since that tapered, I went ahead and I just built that up with weld. Here, I put some filler rod in there, a piece of 5/16, and then I welded it up to get our girth here and our girth here. Okay. Once you get your second pass welded up, then once again, you take it and you grind it and you blend it. Okay. And blending, like I said, we start out with a grinder, and then once we get it ground down the way we want it, Then we go in and we use the flap wheels. Once we get it all grinded and blended, then we're ready to move on to the final steps of welding the boss on and making sure it's right, and just double checking everything just to make sure everything's right. Once you grind it and blend it the second time, then you take a real good look at it all the way around. Once you do that and you look at it, this time I use a flap wheel this time, and I clean it up with a flap wheel after I use the grinder. Then I use a flap wheel and I flap wheel it, you know, and get it blended, and then I look at it and then I make any last minute adjustments with the third pass. Okay. 3 passes normally does it. Every once in a while you might have to just touch up with a fourth, but 3 passes normally does it. When you get done with the third pass, all this should be smooth and blended in. Okay. Now on this one down here, if you look at that, that actually came down and around here, so I had to put a pretty sharp bend here and then fill that in. Your eye will work just as hard, if not harder, than anything else when you're doing these. You have to have an eye for it. You have to look at it. You have to keep setting the original right next to it. You can do one without an original, but it'd make it a lot easier if you've got an original to go by. So that's how we do that. So that's all we've got so far today. This is as far as we're going to go. Hope you enjoyed this part, and we'll see you on the next part. Thank you. Bye.